I do it. Okay. Can we go down and identify ourselves, the people that are here? Gail,
Gail Sites,
Tish Gallagher.
Alice Reel.
Tim Moore. Fred Gallagher.
I also want to recognize the presence of the city manager and Antonina Cantillo.
got it.
All right, and then and also our chair of the president of the city council, Suzanne Souter, and also Emily DeHingra.
You can pretend there's no H, so Dingra.
Dingra.
Yeah.
Okay, who is going to be working with us as a city engineer. I guess Brian is essentially our city engineer, but you work with Brian. So this is from AECOM. So thank you for being here. Okay, so review of minutes of last meeting. I know we just got these this morning. We're gonna work that out at some point where we have a little time to look them over. The only thing I saw, let's see, there was something in here about something I said, and I don't even know what I was talking about. It's probably not that off, but I said, it says Ms. Real will
I'm sorry,
contact the city,
page-
the county engineer.
page-
This is on page 4.
Whereabouts on page 4?
This is miscellaneous.
Okay,
Ms. Real will contact the city engineer to see if they might be able to give the committee any help. Did I say that last
Yeah.
time? Okay, I didn't do that, so I apologize for that. I forgot I had said that, but I will do that. I'll go with you.
Wait a
the
minute.
county engineer, not the city engineer.
County.
But I thought you meant Emily.
Yeah, I thought I did too. That's why I was surprised but it's possible that I was talking about Newcastle County, because we were searching for any kind of help.
Yeah.
You know, so, but other than that, if
Do
that's
you
what
want
I
me to
said.
delete
then-
county?
Huh?
Do you want me to delete county?
No,
Okay,
just keep it the way
leave it the way it is, okay.
just keep it the way it is. Does anybody have any other changes or any changes? No.
No.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, so let me tell you what's happened about the NRCS since our last meeting. Emily, you are familiar with where we are with all of this, I hope. Okay. As we said we would, Gail and I met with Antonina and Suzanne at the city offices, and we discussed meeting with Diane Gray, who is the new conservationist is the title that she's given for the state of Delaware. She just moved from Michigan, which is a little bit difficult for us because she's back and forth from Michigan to Delaware. And so she doesn't have a whole lot of time. She's moving and everything. But we talked to Ann Baldwin, our contact over there. And Ann said, well, let me talk to Diane and we'll set up a meeting for when she's around. You know, she's in and out, but we'll have a meeting at some time in the near future. So I hadn't heard from her. So this morning I emailed her and I said, Ann, can you give me any update when there might be a possible meeting? And she said, well, Diane is out of the office through next week. So it'll probably be when she gets back. And then at 3:30, she sent this email. Diane is available for a virtual meeting on Wednesday, October 2nd in the morning. Would you like us to set that up in order to meet sooner than when she will be back in the state? So we're all available. Gail and I and Suzanne and Antonina, not Emily, she's Kittering in Maine, but maybe Brian will be on the phone call. I don't know if anybody else is interested in being on the phone call. I could probably add your name to the list if you were, but anyway, we're thinking about October 2nd, which is next Wednesday at 10 a.m. I'll let you know about it, but she has to, I guess, set it up to have the particular people involved. So I'll need your names when I contact Ann.
If we can, let's just keep it to 2, so you and Gail on the
Okay.
call, that we avoid a quorum.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
All right. So you know, what Ann said to me in the morning, this morning when I first talked to her, she said, there's no news on further funding. Our headquarters will be waiting for the next fiscal year budget to be passed to hear about future funding levels for watershed projects. As we all know, the funding is, you know, touch and go even now. Federal funding, I mean, the government could shut down next Tuesday if they don't get it all together. And so it's really, it's hard to say what's going to happen because of that and because of other things. And we don't know, you know, eventually who will be elected president, what kind of budget we will have, that kind of thing. So it's a very difficult time right now to get any kind of answer for the future. But we're still working on it. I mean, we're, you know, I haven't gotten any word from Ann that we shouldn't be, you know, hopeful that there will eventually be some money there. And Diane Gray did not say to us, look, don't even bother or anything like that. She's willing to meet us. So I think those are, you know, hopeful. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I'm hopeful that there'll be some progress, and we'll see. We're doing whatever we can to get there. Anyway, Gail, you want to talk about your contacts with Coon's office?
Sure. Well, I guess we started last spring when we got word that things might be in jeopardy by sending letters to the Senate and House office. Alice and I and Antonina had a call with Senator Carper's office in the spring, with Bonnie Wu, and then we were supposed to get the DC legislative person, and that person wasn't available. We got somebody else, and they didn't really know. They eventually got back to us and said they just found out that funds had been cut for the NRCS quite substantially, but they didn't really know anymore. So then I followed up with emails to Senator Coons's office, Andrew Dinsmore, and he connected us with Kate Moore. So Andrew, I used to work with Andrew way back in the day, 12 years ago or something. He's since left Senator Coons's office, but Kate Moore is, I actually talked to her today. So she's on board, understands the project, is supportive, has known Ann for, she said 20 plus years. And so she has connected with Ann, talked to her about our project. And she's, you know, they'll support however they can. If you need letters of support, but like I said, she was telling me that, you know, sometimes they have to, you know, balance how much they push, and, you know, they're trying to be supportive, but, you know, not trying to push too much. So, but there is that support there from Senator Coons's office. Of course, the other two offices are in flux because Senator Carper is retiring. However, so another contact I made was through our governor's office, Governor Carney. Greg Patterson is in the governor's office, and he is in charge of infrastructure implementation, especially federal projects that the state gets money for. And he did hold a few weekly conference calls with all three federal offices. And I got back in touch with Greg. Of course, the governor is also transitioning out, as are all the people. And I talked to Greg this week or last week, and he said, actually, I'm in charge of transitions.
Oh, great.
And he's not sure where he's going to end up. I don't think anybody is right now. You know, they're all looking around, and But anyway, I said, do you have any recommendations? And he recommended that I try to get in touch with John Kane. And so John Kane is, let's see, so Senator Carper, I guess, still is chair of the Environmental and Public Works US Senate Committee. And John Kane has been his assistant for many, many years. I found all this out through searching Google. So I did put in a call to him. Greg just said that he's very knowledgeable about these kinds of projects and where funding lives and could be found. So anyway, I tried to get in touch with John Kane, but he did not respond to me yet. So it's been about a week. Let's see. So I guess that's just trying to keep the offices aware and up to date with where our project is. Well, one other thing, I went to the senior center event on Sunday, which was very nice. And I had never met Representative Frank Cook before. So I was talking to him about the project, and he said he's been having meetings with Kevin Donnelly, who we all know because he's been coming to, he has come to our meetings about other flooding issues. And so he suggested that we, a couple of us get together with Representative Cook, Kevin Donnelly, and talk about our flooding and where we are. So, and I know, Timmy, you said you were going to talk to Senator Poore. I mean, I also think we should make sure we have our local senator and representatives informed and, know where we are and what we're trying to do, because they can also help.
Timmy, want to talk about your contacts?
Yeah, so I reached out to Senator Poore. I gave her just a rundown, kind of like the major key things that have happened where we had money allocated to us, the funding got cut, and then basically because shovels weren't ready to go into the ground, they got, sent to other projects that are a lot farther along than we are, and we're kind of on, well, not kind of, but we're on the wait list. So I'm waiting to hear back from her. I know she's got a lot going on with getting things passed and this and all down in Dover. So I'm just waiting to hear back from her. I have some questions in reference to the bond bill and stuff. I know I went through it with the boat ramp, but although it seems like it wasn't that long ago, my memory is longer gone. So I can't
These
remember.
projects take a long time.
I can't remember certain stuff, so I
Right.
just wanted to clarify.
Doesn't get any better.
No, it doesn't.
But thanks. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry, your name again?
However, I was able to have a nice conversation with Kevin Donnelly, yesterday, and he had he really didn't have a lot of information, but he did one thing that he did say is he would, and we talked about it at the last meeting, he would recommend doing it in smaller phases, especially now. He said just how things are, I'm not going to say how things are unstable, but just kind of like where things are and all, you're more apt to get somebody to bite and commit to things in phases versus kind of like overall. And I know we talked about it in reference to if we did stuff in phases, if work was done and completed at a phase, would it affect something else? Like would it push water or divert water and make another area that may have like minor flooding, would it be moderate or major flooding? And one of the things that he had said was, given the river, with the dynamics and how big it is and everything like that, the the likelihood of, and I'll just use the dikes for an example. The likelihood of, say we want to, upgrade the dikes, the likelihood of that project getting completed, would it impact another area in the city with flooding? He says, he would venture to say, not at all, just because of just the dynamics and how big and wide and other areas that water can go, that it probably wouldn't, raise or increase to affect those areas. So in reference to cost wise with like, the engineering fees, he said, whatever your budget or whatever the project cost is, to try to determine the engineering fees, because I know that was one of the questions I believe we had at the last meeting, like how do we know how much is engineering, how much is construction and all? He said roughly a rule of thumb, is anywhere from 10 to 20% is your engineering cost. But really it's more like 10 to 15%. He said 20% is just being real conservative, with how we are with inflation and that kind of stuff. So other than that, that was all the information that he provided. He was in contact, he did know about, I know, Council President Souter had, at the last council meeting, had mentioned about the Broad Dike, that dike there had a trunk in it,
Right.
so he was up to speed on that, and he knew everything about that, like, yeah, there was an issue, a couple weeks ago, so he's definitely in the loop and knows what's going on, and all that, so, but, so that's where we are with.
Bill,
with
did you want to
those.
tell him about attending a meeting?
So,
Possibility?
yeah, see, I told you my memory was like,
That's what-
so he did
So
say.
proud of myself, I remembered it.
I I asked him if he could attend this meeting. I know it was kind of late notice. But he had a commitment already. So it's best to give him like 2 months in advance if we want him to attend a meeting. I asked him about October, and he had the third Tuesday was committed for him. The second and third Tuesday was committed. The only available Tuesday he had in October was the first Tuesday. So if we want to get him on a night where we meet, we'll probably have to do that 2-3 months in advance, and that way we can get him on the books and we've had him here before, and he's got a lot of knowledge and insight and stuff. So
I'm surprised that he said that raising the dikes won't affect other places. I'd really like to talk to him about that, because it's sort of anti-intuitive, if you raise something here, that the water's gonna go around there.
so
But, I'd love to hear him
I
talk
think the
about it.
reason is because of the depth, as in like across to
Mhm.
Jersey.
Mhm.
It's just open. There's not so much obstructions. So it's not like it's not like on a property where your downspout goes out and the terrain, it takes it to a different area and runs it off. Whereas the river, there's really no terrain there for it to go, other than like up or down the river, but it has that depth as well that it can go out too. That's how I would interpret it.
But they've also been in here and said, it has to be contiguous. You can't have one neighbor who decides, oh, I'm not gonna do it. because-
Well, he's talking about just raising the dike, so that wouldn't even, you'd be down Broad Dike, and then it would go down on the Strand.
Well, and I think if we're only gonna do areas, that we need to look at where, if we're talking riverine flooding, we need to look at where it's coming in now. Down at the end of, like, at
Murray
Chestnut
Day, you
Street.
talking about?
No, at
right,
Chestnut
yeah.
Street, so down there where, where the Fort Casimir was, that floods a lot. And the
We
backyards.
probably flooded the last 6 days.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I was
so,
gonna
It's
say,
vital.
even-
so
even
in that
like
kind of
across the
example,
street
it's
from
Mother
us.
Nature there. It's how the moon is and all that. So I mean, like Route 9's flooded, not flooded all the way across, but there's definitely water, impeding on the northbound
high tides.
lane but the moon's
Yeah, high
right,
tides in a
and
storm.
everything's right so far.
And a full moon.
And a full moon.
Yeah.
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 So like if we were to say, let's fix the flooding, you know, like put berms or whatever on at Fort Casimir, that would, I think, push it down to the Strand. So those places would need to be done together, I think.
Yeah, maybe there would be a natural break like at where the pier is, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and also you don't have people living right there.
Right, and then Battery Park, although it doesn't have any berms, well, only on the very end there, at the end of Third Street, but it doesn't really, there's a lot of land there before it gets to houses or anything, so
Right.
it would seem to me that if we're gonna look at riverine flooding, then it's gotta be those two places
Right.
first, and then probably the park.
Yeah. Okay, well, these are things that we gotta think about in the future. It's gonna, you know, we're still waiting to hear from Diane Gray and NRCS, and when that, when we get a word on that, then I think we should be contacting the, who are the people? Oh my God, see, this is what happens, Tim, I'm telling you, the people who do the dikes, you know, I'm talking about the federal government dikes, they're, the Army Corps of Engineers, thank you. That we should be contacting the Army Corps about, you know, a project for us, however much they can do it or how much. The only thing that I'm worried about is, every project but the NRCS involves a lot of, city, involvement as funding and things that, you know, that we have to worry about that part of it. And this was, the NRCS was just so perfect because there was no, you know, the city did not have to contribute to the funding. Anyway, so Emily Dingra, I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Emily is from AECom, and Emily, could you give us a rundown of your background?
Yeah, I'm a water resources engineer, civil engineer, professional engineer, and I'm also a certified floodplain manager with ASFPM. So I do a lot of, and I work on coastal and riverine projects. So my background's more on coastal modeling, storm surge modeling, and tidal modeling. I also do a lot of climate change and adaptation projects, both with the modeling side of sea level rise and the riverine side with the changing hydrology, as well as working with, you know, AECOM. We have a lot of planners and like diverse teams. So we work together to look at vulnerabilities of cities, counties, businesses, things like that, and help manage adaptation solutions. Anything from like small projects, yours is not really super small project. It's kind of a big project. But you know, anything from like a small local project up through, I've worked on the New York City flood resilience projects that they're doing up there with lots of different adaptation solutions, everything from like gates, flip up gates to changing the landforms to have like underground flood wall kind of things too. So
Have you worked with any Delaware coastal towns?
yeah, so I helped with some of the FEMA mapping projects. Like this was a while ago now. I've been with AECOM almost 20 years. So
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
well, it was formerly URS. So but yeah, so I've been there a while. So we did work on those projects and some of the sea level rise studies that they did. But again, this was probably almost a decade ago now. But familiar with the Delaware coast and up the river, all those areas.
Well, I'm sure everybody has questions. My first question is, and I understand that this is, you know, these are questions that would probably have to do some research, but you know, we're just so pleased to have an engineer and a floodplain manager, for God's sake. But so we have this, you know, NRCS project that you're aware of, and they had various scenarios that they were looking at, and one of the scenarios was putting berms and various other things along the coastline. I think it was up to 13 feet. And they talked about individual spots, what would go there and everything. And we also have this, which is assessment of dike alternatives that that I think AECOM, yeah, this is from AECOM. And it has a lot of, you know, ideas about where things would go, where would berms go, that kind of thing. Now, NRCS has 3 different phases. They do the planning, engineering, and then the construction. And we were wondering, considering how much has already been looked at as far as the possibilities, how much would be involved in planning per se? And is it really expensive to do a plan that would then be going to an engineer?
You have a lot of work done already, so
Yeah.
I think that's, your basic planning is kind of already committed, unless you wanna reevaluate because of some changing conditions or something like that. But it seems like your planning is already mostly done, and the engineering, like you have just kind of concepts, so it would have to go into the full design phase would be most of the engineering and then construction, like you said, 10 to 15% on engineering and then construction. So I think it seems like you have most of your planning done.
Oh, good.
Yeah. If that's the alternative that, everyone wants to go with. You did talk about having to phase this potentially, which might be a planning exercise, but it could also be on the engineering side if you're trying to think about, you were talking about flood impacts and like which sections would you have to do together? That would probably be more on the engineering concept design.
Okay, because we were, one of the things that Ann Baldwin from the RCS told us was that they were looking for shovel-ready projects. So we were hoping to be at least partially shovel-ready.
Yeah, well, you have a plan.
Yeah, something that we could say, well, don't worry about the planning so much, we'll just go right into the engineering or something like that. Because we're trying to find some reason why our project should get some kind of priority, over there. So we have done the planning basically.
Mhm.
Well,
And
that's
so I went through this in more detail that AECom and others had done, Delaware Coastal Programs, and the work that NRCS had done, I mean, it's pretty much this. They chose the 13.5 foot option. This has 10.5 as one possibility to raise everything to 10.5 to 13.5 as an alternative. But I mean, this is a plan.
Pretty
and
similar.
they and they just they picked the 13.5. It's kind of like the Cadillac that they chose, and their preliminary, whatever it is, the PIFR, just enhance what is already in here. So yeah, I feel like we've done a lot of planning. And one thing I didn't understand when we were working with David Athy, involved in this, and then there was the follow-up study that I think AECom, the elevation, where a lot of that data had been gathered,
Yeah,
but not.
Yeah, we're almost at the end of that one. So there was a lot of other work done by another contractor to get like first floor elevations
Right.
and building.
McBride and Ziegler.
Yes, and collect all that data. So we've been trying to, they have like most of the data that they provided, but their funding only went so far. So there were like some missing pieces. So we're trying to fill in the gaps and do the final analysis, which is a HAZIS model run. And HAZIS is a model that basically gives you kind of a benefit cost analysis for different flood scenarios.
Right.
And says, based on your building stock, at this flood level and this dike level and whatever, you can tell it's kind of a benefit cost analysis. So that's what we're trying to wrap up. I just saw that there was an extension on that for a few months, so it should almost be done though.
Okay, and so how does that help, that analysis?
I think it's looking at telling you, again, the benefits of the project, which would be helpful for grant funding to say, it's telling you losses avoided. So if we build the dikes to this elevation and an event happens, we will avoid this many dollars in losses. And so that's the benefit of the project, and you can compare that to the cost of the design and the construction, and that's your benefit cost analysis. And so that will help in projects like of different funding categories. So Army Corps has its own benefit cost analysis, and FEMA has a different one too, but this can play into those if you're trying to get those types of grant funding.
Is that the modeling that they talk about? Is that exactly what you're talking about, or is modeling more an additional thing?
Like if you were doing like I mentioned, modeling for the phases and things. I was talking about, Riverine, our coastal model that would show the kinds of things we were talking about before. If you only built part of it, where might the flood impacts be? If you're going to a phase, if you wanted to go to a phased project, you might want to include some of that modeling so you can show like, yeah, it's gonna be okay to build these sections right now with this funding, and it's not gonna impact other parts. But what this has this modeling, it's kind of more of an economic model, to again, show the benefits and the cost, compared to the cost.
So would that help, give justification to raising to 10.5 versus 13.5?
Yeah, it could show how much benefits you get for different elevations, and then you
Okay.
can compare that to the cost.
versus the cost.
Right, versus the cost of it, yeah.
Would, have you seen in the past, would the report that you're waiting on now, would that contradict anything in this year? So, and I just say, so we'll just say, for example, since we're talking about dikes, this here is specific, kind of specific about 10.5 feet and 13 feet, right, to raise the dikes.
10.5 and 13.5.
10.5, 13 in that
this.
one. So what if they came back and said something different that
No, I
didn't jump
think
with those
yeah.
numbers in reference to the cost?
I will double check, but I'm pretty sure it's like based on the elevations from this, or maybe just the
Okay.
13.5
So
one.
they basically utilize
Yeah,
some of this
That
information
planning.
and just associate it with a cost measure, so to speak.
I don't think we have the cost in there, it's more like the benefits
Okay.
of losses avoided, like, people don't get flooded, they don't have to, pay damages or repair their homes or whatever, so we're getting more the benefit side of it, and then you could later compare, when you get the cost, then you could compare it to the cost.
Is it just basically financial economic, or do they look at the fact that we've got a lot of historical buildings?
I would have to dig into that
You
and
know,
see how the houses are,
the benefit
Yeah.
of preserving
I
our
don't
history.
think that that's included in the HAZAS model, but I'm not a HAZAS expert, so let me
Okay.
follow up with you on that.
Well, you've obviously got a vast amount of experience in this field. Are there funders that you think are really the best or the easiest or the most comprehensive or any of that? I mean, have you got some advice for us about where to get funding? Beyond the NRCS and the Corps of Engineers, I guess?
Yeah, you mentioned Corps of Engineers, sometimes those require contributions from the city too. I'm familiar with some of the bigger FEMA projects have provided funding. As you were talking before, I was thinking that I'd like to do a little more research on some of the more recent, like, infrastructure bills that have a lot of funding. I know has come
Yeah.
recently in the, it's BIL.
You mentioned FEMA, so
Yeah.
FEMA has money to prevent flooding as well. I think
Yeah.
FEMA is coming in after the fact. kind
Yeah,
of
they
thing, but-
do, pre-disaster mitigation.
Because I noticed in our paper last week, the Delaware City has, they're currently working to secure funding for their part of a FEMA grant. FEMA provides 90% of the funding. And they're working on some
What's the name of that thing? It's Visit the V?
Monroe Madison Street flood mitigation project. What's the name of what?
Verdantis? Have you ever heard of Verdantis?
Yeah. Yeah, but-
Engineer.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's our engineer.
Mhm.
That's what-
engineering.
That's their engineer.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
And
That's their
anyway,
city
so
engineer.
FEMA is another option. I mean, 90%
Oh.
paid is pretty good.
Yeah, they recently started, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a project to give like bigger grants. They called it the BRIC funding, building resilience infrastructure, something or other, for communities. And so that was a project where they were trying to be able to get like larger amounts of money to communities or regional groups to do bigger projects, so that's something we could look at too.
And I noticed that this study that AECom was involved in, this funds from the Delaware Coastal Programs and Office for Coastal Management, National, NOAA, National Oceania
Atmosphere.
Atmospheric
Atmospheric Administration, yeah.
Administration, US Department of Commerce.
NOAA has some grant funding. It kind of comes on and off. I should look into what's currently out there and what opportunities.
That
I
was
don't
one of
think
the-
of them as
yeah.
much though of like levies and dikes, so.
Okay.
That was one of the organizations we originally contacted or researched, and I think it was Mike Marinelli who spoke to them and didn't think that there was anything there for us. I don't remember the reason why, but I do know.
Yeah, they're not
We
as
did
much
contact
into the infrastructure projects.
Hmm. Well, originally, the PIFR suggested that it was $37 million that would be for the whole thing, for the planning, the engineering and the construction. And so they were gonna put $2 million into planning. That's what Ann said they had suggested. And so if you take 2 million out of 37, that's 35. 10% of that is $3.5 million. Is that what we could expect maybe? Oh, engineer would be more, I guess, wouldn't it? Oh, engineering you were talking about, it's 10.
Yeah.
Yes,
We're
engineering.
talking about engineering.
So for
$4
$4 million?
Yeah,
approximately?
I would, I'd have to check with some colleagues about like what these sort of projects would normally cost, but that seems like a decent ballpark range.
Yes, okay. Are there places we could ask for funding for just the engineering? I mean, you guys engineers, are you funded?
Oh,
By
yeah,
a lot of,
definitely. That's how you could phase a project too. You could go through design and then once that's done, especially it reduces the risk because construction costs, we've all seen them just increase dramatically. So if you can get through design and then send it out for a bid for construction, you have more certainty
Okay.
with what your construction
And
costs.
you're
will be.
shovel ready.
Then
Exactly.
Finally.
We're so desperate to be shovel ready here.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, is there anything else you wanted to let us know? Well, because we're so
Hopefully
thrilled that
don't
you're
work
here.
on- yeah.
None of us are engineers and David Athey was our godsend. We really liked him an awful lot. So, we were decimated when he died. So I'm really glad that you're on the job here. I
Yeah,
appreciate
Happy to
it.
be here.
Anybody else have any other questions for Emily? Okay, all right, thank you so much, Emily, I appreciate it. All right, so I have something that I have to read, because, Mr. Gross isn't here, so, I have to read this for him. Now, I believe we were supposed to have this last week, last month, so I don't know, whatever. Good evening. I'd like to comment on a couple of thoughts I have concerning the Flood Resiliency Committee. I thank you all for doing the job that you've been doing over the past couple of years, but I have got to say that it's time to pull the plug on it, even if it's for a temporary period of time. Since its inception, the main mission was to solve issues in the city regarding flooding problems. Even though this committee has searched out funds and grants, there is no money available in the near future. At least if there was some short-term solution that were put into place regarding the city's flooding problems, there would be a purpose for this committee to be kept active. Unfortunately, there's nothing that this committee can achieve for the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you again, everyone, for your dedication and time you've spent trying to resolve our city's flooding problems. Sincerely, Phil Gross. There you go.
It sounds like he wrote us off.
I don't know. So if we're not here, something will get done in the next 3 to 5 years? I don't know. Anyway, even if he's not here, he's here in spirit. Anybody else have any comments from task force members, other things that you wanted to talk about? No?
So I think we need to I think people outside of the need should understand, we need to be careful. We're not here to solve flooding. We're not gonna solve flooding, okay? We're, we're here to do what we can, hopefully make stuff happen to minimize flooding the most effective way that we can, because we're not gonna stop flooding, because if it doesn't come in from the river or whatever, when we do have a storm, it's gonna come in from stormwater, which is gonna cause flooding and that kind of stuff. So there's some stuff that's out of our, control. But I think, I still feel strongly that, that we should still maybe try to address a small project and get it completed. And that way, like the committee, it kind of, how do I want to say it? It kind of, it shows the community that, hey, although we may not have tackled this big thing, we did tackle a piece of it. And I'll just use the broad dike where it always floods on the road there, right? So I look at that as a priority, because when that floods, it definitely impacts us big time. So it's no different when there's a crash on 95, which has been happening here way too frequently, and we can see how it impacts the city. I mean, it shuts us down, getting out Frenchtown Road and all over the place.
So you're talking about
So-
that like 7th Street extension
area.
area?
You know where Three Countries is?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Now,
it floods that.
they fixed a drain there and it seems to have been better
So-
since then.
So they have, and I noticed, I think a couple meetings ago, I commented on, it looked like they got in there and like pushed some stuff back and all. But maybe if, and I talked to I talked to Kevin Donnelly about that. And I asked if that was one of his projects, though, although he has like a county number, he's a state, conservation. And he said, we would have to go through the state of Delaware for that Delaware or something. That was one of their projects and all. But I think if we can get that squared away, whether that means it needs to be cleared out, whether there needs to be some fingers in there and it gets dug out more, so it just, that way water has somewhere to kind of, when it comes up, to just kind of sit there instead of coming out on the road. But I think if we address something small and get it accomplished, I think it helps us out with one momentum, because it's like, wow, all right, we got something done, fine, we were able to get something done, you know what I mean? The road doesn't flood, which is a good thing, because when that floods,
It's a mess.
it shoots it through 3rd Street Extension and, Chestnut and all that. So.
The guy that we talked to up in Hoboken said they're basically the same thing. Find something small and be successful at it.
Yeah, and I think when doing that, I think that can get us into the dikes or get us into that next project, and plus it buys a little time. It gives things, it kind of takes the attention off, it takes the attention away from certain aspects and it puts it on this one aspect. And when they see that something happening and it gets completed, then, we can go on to the next, and there's more, I don't know, hope, if you want to call it, or, you know what I mean, from the community.
Tim, has that area flooded recently?
Mhm. Yeah, I was gonna say, just, not enough to shut it down. I think
No, it was
I
over
think
the edges of the
it
ground.
was the edges, but the problem that it ends up happening is, and it's mainly at nighttime, is when you're coming into New
You
Castle,
don't even see it.
and once you come over that bridge and, you don't see it until it's too late,
Yeah,
and because it
yeah.
ends up creeping out, on that lane, and then you get
And it's
people that
dark and-
either stop or swerve, and then there's that potential of going into, the
And
other
especially
lane.
in winter. freezes.
Yes,
I don't mean to interrupt, but
No, you're fine.
I talked with Keith Wilson from Public Works
Mhm.
when it happened the last time, because Antonina it was a Saturday when I
Yes.
became aware that
Yep.
this had happened. And it was just barely on the edges of the road, but there was a big puddle in the Three Countries parking
Yeah.
lot. And that truck repair place on the
yeah,
other side.
it always,
Their
Yes.
parking lot was a mess. And what Keith told me, and I had heard this from him before, is logs and stuff drift down the river
Mhm,
and they get sucked into that intake
correct,
pipe and they jam it.
right,
And
they
then the
keep it
gate-
open,
And the gate's supposed to close at high tide. Well, if a log jams in there, it can't close.
right,
And so therefore, the water keeps going in. And that Saturday, when it flooded, it was high tide, so that pipe was underwater.
right,
So he went down there and tried, but
Yeah.
when you can't see what you're doing, you're working blind, he couldn't clear
yeah,
it.
plus those gates, or metal gates, and they're pretty heavy to try to, even to pry, get a metal bar and all. It's
So
tough.
is there a way to develop some kind of
Well, that's what
screening
I,
system?
because Kevin says, like on a weekday, he swings by there every morning on his way to work. And if he sees stuff gathered around there, he goes down and pulls it out. But that's what I was wondering, and this would be something to ask Kevin. If we could put some kind of a cage-like thing around the end of that intake valve. Now logs would build up against that, but that would be much easier to clear even at high tide.
Right.
And the water would, and the gate would still close at high tide if
Mhm.
nothing was jammed. And it wouldn't seem to me that this would be an enormously expensive project.
Right,
And I even saw along Battery, I walk along the Riverwalk almost every day. And one of the new, one of the pipes that goes out, I guess it's a drain pipe,
Mhm.
it has just like this rectangle thing of bars. I mean, it looks like a
yes,
playpen-like thing
Mhm.
around it. And there's a top on it too, and it looks like they're anchored into the ground. They were, it's
Right.
underwater, so I just say, I don't know how it's attached. It would have to be attached, because otherwise the current would just take it away.
is that system Army Corps of Engineers?
I think it's conservation district, and those ditches were originally dug. I guess Jeff Bergstrom told me this from
Yeah.
Kevin Donnelly, for mosquito control back in,
Yeah.
we all remember when
Yeah.
they used to pour oil on the ditches to kill the mosquitoes before they knew how bad that was for everything.
And a lot of that is sooted in, so.
Right, but people, I remember in one of our very early meetings when Dave Athey was still with us. Someone said, well, why don't we just clear out those ditches? And he said, well, when those ditches were dug, the land was higher than the river. But now the river's coming up. And so especially at high tide, the river is higher than the land. So if you clear out those ditches, but it's not gonna fix the problem, because instead of the water draining from the land into the river, it's gonna go the other way. And, the people who grew up around here who remember those ditches, oh, just remount those ditches and that'll solve our
Yeah,
problem.
that,
Well,
I've heard that so many
yes.
times.
No, it's not, because the situation has changed. But it would seem to me getting some kind of protective grill or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it around those intake pipes.
I
Yeah,
have
Yeah.
a meeting.
Relatively small project that, as you said, would show positive, visible results, do an important thing to cut down on problems, and, let the community know that, yes, we are doing something.
Does
Right,
that happen at the other two dikes where there are intake, like?
I don't know.
So-
That's another thing.
Yanacocha and
So-
down at Army Creek?
So it did, I know for a fact it happened on, down at Army
Army.
Creek.
Oh, Army Creek.
Because remember when they had that emergency repair for the
Yes,
sinkhole in the
yeah,
thing?
That was.
So that day, I happened to be working, so myself and my partner went out and there was a log that was stuck there, so we took a Zodiac out and metal to try to like lift that gate and try to move that log, and that gate is every bit of, a couple inches thick. And also, it's pretty impressive to try to get that, and maneuvered enough and then try to get whatever's jammed in there, however it flows, because that current,
That
believe it or
current
not,
sucks it in,
that
yeah.
current, there's some
Well, now,
force
is
in there.
that gate, when that gate jams, does that contribute to the flooding on Route
On
9
Route
south of
9.
Dobbinsville?
I would say,
wondering.
I would say it doesn't help,
I'm sure it doesn't.
you know, but I would, yeah, I would
So
venture to say it
is
doesn't
that
help.
a project, like I said, not a huge project?
Yeah, so I think there's
Maybe
two, I,
$200,000, I don't know, just
Yeah,
throwing a number out there.
yeah, I
but-
mean, I know I think there was twofold situation down at Army Creek there, and I think it's on the states, it's one of the states thing. And I think one is way back when I was going to St. Peter's, they redid that bridge and all, and the bridge is here, and it was always low. And the bridge is here, but the road, you can see it, especially when you're at the turn and you look south, how it's kind of like high and then goes low and then high and then low and then goes around that bend. So I think one, the road isn't high enough, you know,
That's on the list, right?
as a temporary fix. But, and I also think that the amount of debris, if people only knew what goes up and down that river,
Oh, just the
is-
stuff that washes up on the street.
is unreal. I mean, those 55-gallon drums, I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty impressive.
A phone pole.
but-
They just recently cleared out that basin right at the start of Broad Dike, you know, where the boat club was.
Right,
And they cleared it all out. I mean, there were piles. They had to bring in backhoes and stuff to clear them all out. There's already stuff back in. Like you said, Gail, the last 6 days, that's been
Right.
flooded in there.
And we just had
and
two
it
beach
brings
cleanups
in-
too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Just had 2 beach cleanups too, with Denrick,
Yeah,
and there's.
Yeah,
it looks like
It's all
it never
back.
happened, right?
so is that something we would start with the conservation
I think
district?
I thought,
I think it's a good idea.
Representative Cook was talking about, he just had a recent, and I think it was about that with Kevin Donnelly.
Right,
But yes,
because, and that way, that flooded really badly, that gets up into parts of Van Dyke Village,
right,
where it keeps going, that's Broad Dike.
right.
Keeps going inland, and I don't know, I know there's parts of Buttonwood that flooded, that's in Frank Cook's district, I'm not sure
Mhm.
how far we get into this. We have-
It looks like his district starts at Delaware Street and
Because
that.
his district he got more of Newcastle in the last redistricting, because he used to just have a little bit of Buttonwood and
Uh-huh.
out in there. So, you know, you get into the politics of it, because we have we're in 2 different state representative districts and 2 different senatorial districts now, because Darius
Oh, I didn't know.
Brown has part of Newcastle down, he didn't used to. So we have to deal with 2 senators and 2 representatives
In our little town.
in our little town.
Emily, have you ever heard of anything like that, like a crib, like around it?
Yeah, I'm sure you can get that kind of, I mean, you mentioned that there was other ones in town, right? that you
Yeah,
had seen.
but now I think it's more for an outtake pipe than an intake
Right,
pipe.
this would be quite large.
This
quite a
would be
bit
a
larger.
more elaborate, it would have to be, because it's an intake.
Yeah.
We have as you probably know, fairly dramatic tidal change
Right.
here, and that brings in stuff that washes down from upriver. And
I
Yeah,
have a meeting next week, with Denrick about the dikes, and so I can mention this to them.
Okay,
Great.
great.
okay.
yeah, because in terms of the road, I think the south of Dobbinsville Road has now made it onto the 5-year plan for Denrick, or Del Dot. We were told at that meeting a couple months ago, but the one on Ferry Cutoff is still on one of these days, when we get around to it, we have enough money, we'll do that. But it's not on any kind of timeline yet.
Right.
And that's gonna be to raise a roadway. I mean, they're both expensive projects to raise a roadway.
So Gail, do you think you could set up a meeting with Frank Cook and Kevin Donnelly, or Frank Cook could set up a meeting with Kevin Donnelly and?
I have a call in, that's what
Okay.
he recommended.
Okay,
so,
good.
But yeah, if we get Frank involved,
Right,
that might
and
help.
he was interested.
Because if that's part of his district now,
Uh-huh.
because it used to be.
Sure, he'll wanna make an impression.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Anybody has anything else to contribute? Okay.
But to me, good idea.
But yeah, I just think something small like that,
Well, if you
especially
could-
with the
if you could
water being
stop
out
that,
on the road, you know, a big
Yeah,
thing.
people would be very pleased with that for sure. Okay, so, anyone want to, make a motion, we adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Lynn.
Meeting next month.
Our next meeting is the third, the third Tuesday in October, which I think is like the 21st or something like that. Let me see.
27th. Well, because October 1st is.
October 1st is a Tuesday.
Yeah.